Hey guys, just a reminder, this is not official medical advice. For such, please seek an appointment with a licensed medical provider. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode. This is a part 2 episode of Dive Into Diet with the star of the show, Lucas Schmidt, our nutrition coach in the Johnson City location. Lucas is in Johnson City right now. What's up, man?
Just ready to work out. No, I don't like working out. I do it, but I don't like it.
I find that to be, you're one of my favorite people on earth, and like you're super, super interesting to talk to. That's why we, do these segments.
Oh, thank you.
But off camera, I love talking to you. And over the course of the years that we've known each other, I've learned that, you're this, in my head, you're this, fitness guru, nutrition guru.
Oh?
And it's funny to hear, you've told me this. You've said, I don't actually like going to the gym.
No. I mean, I won't lie. There's sometimes where I'm like, nah, it's fine. I can do it. Sure, I don't mind going. But most of the time I get in the car and I go, I don't want to. Gosh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do stuff. I just don't want to do stuff. That's my motto. I don't want to do stuff, man. But then we do it, so...
And I know you've got some rules for yourself, and
yeah.
I'm sure you've gone over them on Dive Into Diet. But it's 4 days. You can mix up the 4 days a week, however you want.
That's what I do. Yeah.
You could go 4 in a row. You could go every other day. You could mix it up. What's your typical? Are you just like getting Monday through Thursday, just getting them out of the door?
Sunday through Wednesday. Usually.
Okay.
If the schedule fits, if I didn't have to go out of town or something. If I have to go to town, I'll, depending on when the trip is, I'll maybe, when I would normally be done Wednesday in the week, I may rest Thursday and work out Friday to get an early start. So when I get back, I have 3 days waiting for me instead of 4. It just depends on how the schedule, I always try to math it out, but it has to be 4 days a week. And every 9 weeks, I take a full week off.
Nice. How'd you pick 4? Your workouts are way more intense than mine. I typically go 5 to 6 days a week, but my lifts are not exhausting. Like speaking of fatigue, like
I don't know. I mean, if you did a workout with me, I don't know if you'd find it exhausting or not. It just depends. My workouts usually math out to be, 18 sets of lifts.
Okay.
With not including the warm-up and maybe some, I'll usually do a failure set in the warm-up of something or something light, and maybe some core work sometimes. I don't do a ton of core work. So it usually ends up being 6 different exercises, usually 3 sets apiece. So I get 18 sets per workout.
Okay, so six exercises. I know you're cycling them, so you're pretty much working out the entire time.
Yeah, my 18 set with warm up and with maybe a couple burnout stuff or auxiliary stuff usually takes me 45 minutes, maybe 30.
Okay.
If I'm moving real quick, I can do it in about 30 minutes. But that's like no rest, and that's like if all the equipment is open and there's nobody and I don't have to wait on them. So yeah, there's very little rest, and I'm usually very tired at the end.
It's funny you say tired. We've been talking about fatigue.
Yes.
These last couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You have some answers. So let's do a quick recap from last week, and then we'll start with what do we do about all these different types of fatigue?
Right. So you got systemic fatigue, which is sort of just general. I'm tired. It's like the best way to experience a high degree of systemic fatigue is actually to go for a sprint or like a 6-mile run. You'll be tired. That's systemic fatigue. I'm just tired generally, And then you got axial fatigue, which is mostly back, like that low back area, middle back, where that you're not always training low back, but sometimes you feel it when you're doing other exercises. And you're like, God, this is tiring. I'm trying to focus on this muscle, but my back. And then you have local fatigue, which is just basically the muscle you're working. Hopefully the muscle you're working. If you're getting local fatigue on a muscle that you're not working,
that's a technique problem.
That's a technique problem. And that happens actually.
Yeah.
There's people, I know guys that they'll be like, I'm like, how much can you like? They'll dumbbell curl. They'll be like, yeah, I curl like 30s. I'm like, okay, 30s, pretty good dumbbell curl with good form, right? If you got really strict full extension at the bottom, hey, that's that. But then I'm like, and I watch the dumbbell curl happen. I'm like, yeah, we're using our shoulders to get through this curl. We're supporting that bicep a lot. And we're not fully extending. That's auxiliary muscles. Now, to be fair, you got to use a little shoulder because the bicep tendon runs through the shoulder. So you got to use it a little bit. But a lot of the times there's like some kind of compensation happening. But generally, local fatigue is just the muscle firing. You feel it, the burn, that muscle burn. So, last time I teased, I would just sort of plug this into, like, how do we apply it to a workout? So the general gist is, and this is more for people a little past beginner level. I mean, beginners can use it, but it's going to apply. It's going to resonate with you more if you've lifted some, okay, for like a year or so, two, or a good 6 months, and you're like in a routine and you know kind of what you're doing. I recommend after a warm-up phase of a workout that you do your heaviest, hardest lifts first thing. So, and you got to warm up to them though. Like, it depends on the lift, of course, but let's use an example. Let's say we're doing, well, I'll let you pick. You want to do upper or lower day? Legs or upper body?
Let's do legs.
Okay, so we got a leg day. Well, name me, what's some of your heaviest lifts on a leg day? Like the scary big lifts, if any.
One that I've been doing on my leg days, it's somewhat of a Bulgarian squat. So
okay.
I got one leg, the top of my foot is on a bench, and then I'm doing a single leg squat with two dumbbells.
Oh yes, it's a weighted Bulgarian split squat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a strenuous lift. It sucks in a good way.
No fun.
It's a great exercise for your butt mostly and your quads a little bit, but get that glute. Yeah. It's very tiring. So that exercise could actually, the cool thing about the Bulgarian split squat, if done well, to me, it doesn't carry a high degree of that axial fatigue, the back. I don't feel it a ton in my back with good form. I'm not like, not like after a deadlift or something. It carries a high degree of systemic fatigue because the glute and quads are two of the largest muscle groups in the body. Mm-hmm. So lots of blood pumping, lots of oxygen. Oxygen's got to get down there to get those working. So that's a very tiring move. Not one you're going to be well able to do at the end of a workout when you're systemically fatigued.
Yep.
Especially, it also requires it's a balance move. You got to use some stabilizer muscles, and you need good focus to do it well, in my opinion. So that's a move I would put near the beginning of the workout. Yeah. If not the first exercise, let's say you were doing, I don't think you're doing barbell squats right now, are you? Okay. No. So a barbell squat is an exercise that carries systemic fatigue and axial fatigue, okay? Because it's a high axial fatigue exercise because you're loading a lot of load and a lot of weight high on the body right across here if you're doing a classic one. And it's designed to hit the quads mostly, and the glutes a little bit, depending on your foot position, your leg width, blah, 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 blah. But really, people who are squatting are working on the quads. That's what they really are after, okay? It's great for the quads, but it carries a high level of all the fatigues. So, and it's also, because of that axial fatigue, it's got a higher risk ratio, risks to benefit. So with that in mind, it requires excellent focus, excellent stabilization, and excellent strength. It's best done at the beginning of the workout, in my opinion, to minimize risk. So what I would do if I had to do both of those exercises, a Bulgarian split squat and a high bar squat in a same workout, would be I'd do a great warm up, which would be some, maybe some body weight squats, like 10 of them. Then I'd go to the bar. First, the barbell squat would be first. I would squat just the bar a few times, 5, 10, whatever. Then I'd put a quarter of the weight or even less that I'm working towards on there, do a couple reps, gradually increase that weight until I'm at my working weight, and I'd do my hard work, get it done. And then I go over and do the Bulgarians. I'd get those both done early on, You'd need a little rest interval between those two, though. That'd be brutal. But that would be my advice, sort of in the axial and systemic. Now, everything after that would be the lower risk stuff, like leg extensions. If you're doing quad extensions, that's a very stable exercise. You can be careful with the weight because it's usually pin loaded, so you're not at risk of like collapsing or having to bail. A barbell squat's a high risk because you're underneath X amount of weight, and if you can't do it, you have to bail. You have to dump the weight, and that's not happening on a leg extension. That's a lot of local fatigue. A leg extension is a very localized fatigue exercise because it's mostly just the quad. The machine isolates the quad, and that's it. You're not using your glutes really, not much. Hamstrings, barely any. So that's how I would structure that workout. So let me just give a category of leg exercises that have a high degree of axial and systemic fatigue in them. And that way...
Axial and...
Yeah, generally. Mostly axial is the risky one. Systemic fatigue just lowers your ability to focus and to endure and maintain control because you're tired. You're just mentally tired and you're physically tired.
Okay.
So high bar squat, deadlift, a standard deadlift, Bulgarian split squats, hack squat, which is the like sled, the sort of angled hack squat. It's a very challenging exercise. But if I had to, but it's lower on axial fatigue because you're on a machine and you've got cushion and you're supported in the back a little bit. Smith machine high bar squat, less axial fatigue than a free barbell squat. Smith machine's on the track, so it's a little safer, and you can lock it to bail. So those are the main ones I'd get done early on, and then you can progress to like hamstring curls, calf raises, any of that stuff. Free no weight stuff like calisthenics, like body weight squats, sissy squats if you try those, if you're brave, single leg squats, pistol squats, blah blah blah. Because those aren't loaded, the risk is lower. It's not risk free. If you've never done a sissy squat, don't just hop into it. And if you don't know what a sissy squat is, you probably shouldn't be doing them or trying them first thing. But anything that carries a high degree of weight and places a lot of pressure on that back, I think should get done first thing. And on that note, to transition to upper body, I advise that if you've done something that's heavy on the axial fatigue, like if you've done a deadlift day, the next day probably shouldn't be anything in the upper body that requires back stabilizers or vice versa. And that's not too many exercises, but like a dumbbell curl or a barbell curl requires some low back stabilization because you're standing upright and this weight is trying to rock you forward and back. Now, if you're doing good form and you're not using momentum, you can mitigate some of that, but you're still having to fire that low back to keep yourself stable through that movement. So you want to consider that. I don't do those back to back, but also you can just swap out exercises. That's another question with axial fatigue. If the purpose of the exercise has nothing to do with the low back, I would try to find a way to get rid of the low back being needed for it. So like a curl is easy to mitigate. You look really weird when you do it, but you can lay on the floor in front of the cable machine and do a lying cable curl.
That's interesting.
It completely removes the back from the equation, and it still isolates the bicep, and it's safer. You can also, if you really want to put your bicep in the clincher, you can lay on a bench, like a plain bench. So benches are narrow, so your arms on either side of you have room to go below. You can take dumbbells, lay flat on your back, instead of curling them this way because you're not fighting gravity anymore. You can drop them down to the floor and curl up to your chest. Now, if you've never done that before, you got to lighten up that weight because what that does, and I've talked about this in other podcasts, full extension of muscle is the best, the deep stretch. If you lay flat on a bench and you extend your arm all the way, like reaching towards your ankles with a dumbbell, your bicep will stretch more than it's ever stretched before, which is why you got to use light weight at first because you don't want to tear something. But you'll feel it all the way up through the shoulder because that's where the bicep tendon runs. So, and that eliminates the back too. No axial fatigue there. You're laying on a bench. It's supporting you. So that's one way to mitigate axial fatigue is try to, if it's not the purpose of the exercise and you can safely remove the back from the equation and you're trying to push back strength in other days, like in a deadlift or something, I would do that so you can recover better. I know that sounds weird. Train the back less to build up strength, but a big component of strength training is recovery. You have to rest. You have to sleep well. You have to get enough hours of sleep, and you shouldn't be stacking axial fatigue after axial fatigue every day. That's a bad idea. So, and that's one of those things. Axial fatigue, in my opinion, can build up over weeks and weeks and weeks. You may not notice it the first 2 weeks, but it's like you go to do a lift you've always done, and for some reason your back hurts. It may be that you're not allowing your back to recover, but it's such a small degree at first that you didn't notice that bar of fatigue building over weeks, that spine compression that's occurring. So if you can spread those out even more, all the better.
When you say spread out, I'm thinking, a couple days, something.
That's
something
usually
along those
enough.
lines. Okay.
Yeah, that's usually enough. And here's the thing: if it's not required, it's just the most efficient way, is what I'm saying. Like I curled with the easy bar sometimes, the barbell curl.
Yeah.
Because I can push a little bit higher load than I could with free dumbbells because I'm not having to stabilize as well. Because the barbell, your hands are on the same item, and so you stabilize it a lot better, and you can move heavier loads. I do that sometimes. I eliminate rocking as best I can. I don't shift and move, which lowers the amount of fatigue on my back. But that's the only bicep exercise I do that I'm standing vertical for. I actually only do 2 right now. And pull-ups are separate. They do work the bicep, but that's for my back. But bicep specific, standing easy bar, and then I lay on the bench flat, and I drop to the floor with lighter weights, and it's killer. But that's all I do in the week, so I don't have a lot of axial fatigue from that. So
it seems to me that, okay, if anything involves or could lead to axial fatigue or systemic fatigue, get those out of the way early, and then end on something that's more localized
or auxiliary, stuff like the little stuff that
Yeah.
we usually hit just because they need to look good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One question I do, it kind of relates. This is more of a personal question. Some days I'll do a little bit of cardio as well as weightlift.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that you should do the weightlifting first and then do cardio. Because when you do cardio, I couldn't explain to you why, but that's what I've heard. What's your thoughts on that? Or are you more of like, get the cardio out of the way, or it doesn't matter?
It's just goal specific. So
Okay.
I wouldn't do a lot of cardio before heavy lifts because again, I want to be as fresh as I can be. So, but if it's like a medium, like maintenance lift day, it's like I'm not pushing any weight. I'm not like increasing my weight. I'm not even focused. It's not my even main building day or whatever. It's probably not that big a deal, but I would usually save the cardio for the end because I can be sloppier and not get hurt.
Yeah.
I could just, heavy lifts. And you also get slightly better performance. So that's another reason to do your heavy lifts first is because after your warm up, is because you can actually probably move more weight with better form because you are ready to go. You're fresh, and you're sort of at your best state, and you can put more into the exercise. Maybe it's just 5% more, but it's still 5% more.
Yeah.
Which could and most likely yield better muscle growth. So,
also I've heard it. It kind of I kind of feel like you're saying this already, but compound movements. Is that typically going to be an axial stressor? Any sort of compound.
Do you care to elaborate what you mean by compound movements?
Squatting, anything that any sort of lift that involves pretty much your entire body or most of it.
Yeah. So
Or compound movement.
large scale maneuvers generally do increase all the fatigues.
Okay.
Yeah, but those are usually the ones that require more weight, and they're squat. I mean, it's a heavy duty move. So yeah, I'd be getting all that stuff. It also requires, the more complicated the maneuver, the more focus and more stabilization you generally need. So it's always better to be at your best when you're going to do them.
Would you do a deadlift and a squat in the same workout?
I wouldn't push both of them in the same workout. So what I mean is, one could. I probably wouldn't, but you can.
Yeah.
I would just make sure that one of them, those are two exercises that people tend to push weight in. Like they want to increase the weight every couple of weeks. Like they're going for, mass gains in those exercises. I'm not in a hurry on those exercises, but if you're that person, if you're a heavy lifter and you're trying to go for personal bests, or you're trying to increase that weight very regularly on those exercises, which those are probably the two most common ones outside of the bench press, I would certainly not do a weight increase on the same day. I would make one my primary and one my maintenance. So I would do a less than working weight on one of them to just keep the musculature, expose it to some stimulus, if I'm working hard on the other one. Does that answer I wouldn't do, I'm going to bump this one 5 pounds and that one 5 pounds today.
Yep.
I wouldn't do that. That's just me, though.
I don't think I would. I mean, after this conversation, I don't do either one of those lifts right now, but I've done both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've had workouts where I did both. I don't think I would, given what I know about fatigue and the risk factor that could go with, say I do a squat and then I go into a dead, I don't even know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. I've probably done it before. It's just not my ideal thing. I usually, my leg days, I generally lean into, am I quadding today more or glute and hamstringing more? I will still work the quad, but it's sort of on a maintenance level. I like a focused intensity on either muscle group. And the thing is, it's hard to not use your glutes and your quads in either specific type. They have to engage. It's just how much are they engaged? Unless you're doing a leg extension. That's pretty quad focused.
Yeah.
So.
Lucas, is there anything you want to add? We've been talking about fatigue and exercising.
I don't think so. I would just summarize it to say, if you're applying this to a workout order, warm up, heavy lifts first, followed by your supplementary maintenance and auxiliary exercises, and then try not to stack a lot of axial fatigue days in a row.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
Well, man, I appreciate the time today. Thank you for talking about, because I feel like, we talk a lot about exercise. We consume a lot of information around exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about the fatigue factor, and, because like you said, rest and recovery is as important as the actual workout.
Oh, yeah. It's very important.
Which is, I hope relieving for people to hear, or encouraging, motivating, any of them.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate the time today. I'm going to let you get back to the office.
All right.
And we'll see you next time.
All right. See ya.
Guys, thank y'all for joining us today for another episode of Dive Into Diet. As always, we'll see y'all next time.
Don't go away.